The most dangerous jobs in human history. Most people complain about their jobs. Long hours, difficult bosses, tedious meetings. But throughout history, some people woke up every morning knowing that today might be the day their job killed them. Not as a distant possibility, as a genuine, likely outcome. These are those jobs. Roman gladiator. Let's start with the obvious one, but most people have the wrong idea about it. Gladiators were not just random slaves thrown into an arena to die. They were highly trained athletes, expensive to train, expensive to feed, expensive to house. Arena owners didn't want them dying every fight. Dead gladiators were bad for business. The reality was more calculated than that. Most fights ended not in death, but in submission. The losing gladiator would raise a finger, asking for mercy. The crowd would decide. The editor, the person hosting the games, would usually grant mercy because killing a gladiator meant compensating his owner. But here's what people miss. Even with mercy, the job was still extraordinarily dangerous. Infection from wounds killed more gladiators than the arena floor did. Analysis of gladiator skeletons shows healed fractures, missing teeth, repeated head trauma. These men absorbed punishment fight after fight, year after year. The average gladiator career lasted about 2 to 3 years. Some lasted longer. A few became celebrities, but most didn't retire. They died just slowly, fight by fight, injury by injury, infection by infection. Leech collector. This one sounds almost comedic until you understand what it actually involved. In 18th and 19th century Europe, leeches were medical gold. Doctors used them for bloodletting, the dominant medical treatment of the era for almost everything from fevers to headaches to mental illness. Demand was so high that leech populations across Europe were nearly wiped out. Someone had to collect them. That someone was the leech collector. Usually a poor woman who would wade into swamps, ponds and marshes with her bare legs exposed. The leeches would attach themselves. She would then peel them off and sell them. The problem was obvious. You couldn't control how many attached or where. Leeches would attach to the inner thighs, groin and genitals. They would crawl into body openings. A single session could result in significant blood loss. Repeated exposure caused chronic anemia. Many leech collectors developed serious infections from repeatedly wading through stagnant water with open wounds, because leeches leave open wounds when they detach. Some died from blood loss. Most simply became progressively weaker over years until they couldn't work anymore. It was one of the lowest paid jobs in existence, and one of the most physically destructive. Radium dial painter. In the early 20th century, a job painting watch dials with luminous radium paint was considered desirable. The factories were clean, the work was indoor, the pay was decent. Young women lined up for the positions. They were told the paint was safe. They were encouraged to point their brushes with their lips to get a fine tip, a technique called lip pointing. They did it dozens of times per shift, every shift, for years. They didn't know they were ingesting radium with every brush point. Radium destroys bone. It accumulates in the skeleton and irradiates tissue from the inside. The first symptoms were jaw pain. Then teeth began falling out. Then the jawbone itself began to literally disintegrate, a condition doctors called radium jaw. Some women's jaws crumbled entirely. Others developed bone cancer throughout their bodies. The company knew. Internal documents later revealed executives were aware of the dangers and actively concealed them. When workers began getting sick, the company denied any connection to the paint. The women who fought back, known as the Radium Girls, took the company to court. They won. Their case established the legal precedent that employers are responsible for workplace safety. It changed labor law permanently, but most of them died young. Some were so radioactive that their bones still register on a Geiger counter today. Chimney sweep. In 18th and 19th century Britain, chimney sweeps were almost always children. Small children, sometimes as young as 4 years old. The job required climbing inside active chimneys, Narrow, soot-filled, scalding hot passages barely wide enough for a small body. Masters would sometimes light small fires beneath children who were climbing too slowly to motivate them upward with heat and smoke. The physical damage was immediate and cumulative. Knees and elbows were rubbed raw on the first day. The skin would eventually toughen. Masters called this seasoning. Eyes became chronically infected from constant soot exposure. Lungs filled with particulates. Growth was stunted from the physical demands placed on developing bodies. The long-term consequence was even worse. Chimney sweeps developed scrotal cancer at extraordinarily high rates. The first occupational cancer ever identified by medical science, documented by surgeon Percival Pott in 1775. The constant soot exposure to skin folds caused malignant tumors. Most chimney sweep children didn't live to adulthood. Those who did carried permanent physical damage for the rest of their shortened lives. Tunnel worker, Hawk's Nest Tunnel, 1930s. In the early 1930s, thousands of workers, mostly black men from the American South, were hired to dig a tunnel through Hawk's Nest Mountain in West Virginia. What the company knew, and the workers didn't, was that the mountain was almost entirely composed of nearly pure silica. Drilling through it created clouds of silica dust so dense, workers could barely see their hands in front of their faces. Silicosis, the disease caused by inhaling silica dust, is brutal. Silica particles lodge in the lungs and cannot be removed. The body's immune system attacks them repeatedly, causing progressive scarring that slowly destroys lung capacity. There is no cure. There is no treatment. The lungs simply stop working. Workers at Hawk's Nest developed severe silicosis within months, not years as typically seen, because the concentration of silica dust was so extreme. Men who had been healthy when they arrived were dead within a year. Some died within months. The company buried bodies on site to hide the death toll. Official records listed 109 deaths. Investigations later suggested the real number was anywhere from 476 to over 1,000. Most victims were never counted because they were black men in 1930s America, and nobody was keeping track. It remains one of the worst industrial disasters in American history. Almost nobody knows about it. Plague doctor. During outbreaks of bubonic plague in medieval and early modern Europe, plague doctors were hired by cities to treat the sick. They were often not qualified physicians. Real doctors frequently refused the assignment. Cities hired whoever they could find, sometimes offering payment per patient treated. The iconic bird mask costume, the long beak filled with aromatic herbs, was a later development, based on the miasma theory that bad air spread disease. It offered essentially zero protection against actual plague transmission. Plague doctors examined patients, recorded deaths, and performed autopsies. They touched the sick constantly. They moved from house to house, from patient to patient, carrying infection with them. The mortality rate among plague doctors was extraordinarily high. Many cities went through multiple plague doctors in a single outbreak. Some lasted days, some lasted weeks. Almost none survived a major epidemic they worked through. They knew the risk. They took the job anyway, sometimes for money, sometimes because no one else would. Either way, accepting the position was, statistically speaking, not far from a death sentence. If you liked this video, subscribe for similar ones or join my Discord to suggest another.